really sure why it's so slow, but anyway, it says there on 407, we're going to talk about the equations for a circle. The equation, which the general form is this, and you know, just like when we did equations for lines, equations for parabolas, the x and the y stay in the equation, and the rest of the values get filled in. The h and the k here represent the coordinates of the center of the circle. The circle can be centered anywhere on the coordinate system. So h and k represent the center of the circle. Over here, the radius of the circle squared is the value that you have on the other side of the equation. So it's not going to be very difficult today. They ask you to give the center and the radius of the circle when they give you the equation. Well, the center is going to be the opposite of these two values. The opposite. The minus sign stays in the equation. The minus sign is part of the equation. So the opposite, 3, the opposite, 5. So the center of this circle is just the point 3, 5. And what's the radius? Well, over here, this represents r squared. So r squared is 16. What does that mean the radius is? Positive and negative 4?
No, positive.
It's a circle. We're talking about the radius, Presley. Positive 4, right? You can't have a circle with a negative. So in this case, we only want the positive root. So center, 3, 5, the radius is 4. How about over here? What's the center of this one? Well, it's the opposite. So the opposite of 2 is negative 2. What about here? There is nothing. 0. Right. If there is no value in here, that means that the k or the h, if it's with the x, that value has to be 0. Right? And for the radius, if r squared is equal to 49, what's the radius? 7. Not a whole lot of work to show for that, right? How about what's the center? 0, 0, right? It's possible to have a circle with center 0, 0. That just means it's centered right at the origin. 0, 0. And what's the radius? 2. This is the r squared, so the radius must be 2. Easy, right?
Yeah.
The graphs. Oh, it's not very hard.
Are we graphing?
Sort of. But watch. I'm not very good at making these. Mine don't come out very well. That's strike 2. 2 and 1. So first of all, what I would ask you to do is write down the center and the radius. What's the center of this circle?
-1 and +2.
-1, +2, because remember, it's the opposite. And what's the radius?
Retrace.
So here's what I would do if I were graphing that. I'd get a different color that you can actually see. The center is at -1, 2. Right there is my center. From there, I would use the radius 3, because remember, the radius is from the center to the outside of the circle, right? So I would go, if this is my center, 1, 2, 3 units over. And I know it has to go through that point. I would go 1, 2, 3 units up. And I know it has to go through that point. I would go 1, 2, 3 units over. It's got to go through that point. 1, 2, 3 units. And from there, don't draw a diamond, please. Circles have no corners. See, and if you go around a couple of times, look how nice that looks. Look at how nice that looks.
Mine's kind of an oval, but we'll work with it.
We'll work with it. So, you know what else you can do that I'm actually going to ask you to do? On some of those, instead of doing it on I want you to go here.
Aw.
Yes, and you can do a couple of those on Desmos.com. So, you're going to be given an equation. You have to write the center and radius. That's easy. You have to graph it. That'll be easy. Desmos.com. The other thing, they're going to give you a center and radius, and you have to write the equation. So remember the basic equation. The basic equation is x minus h all squared, y minus k all squared. Do you remember this from geometry?
No, we were in quarantine.
Yeah.
Is that when we were, okay. So good thing that
I think that.
Actually,
Well-
we might have, I don't know, I don't remember.
We definitely did not. No, all right, we just don't work with it.
They just had
Well-
quarantine, so we did Khan Academy stuff that like nothing to do with geometry.
Well, anyway, this should be fairly easy today, I think. The only other thing you're gonna do is use this center and the radius, and you're gonna make the equation then. Well, remember, when you plug it in here, it's gonna be the opposite. So if the center coordinate is a 3, then it's gonna be minus 3 there. Don't forget to square it. If the center coordinate is negative 2, then it'll be y plus 2. And over here is the radius squared. I would prefer if you actually squared that. What is 6 squared?
36.
So I would like you to put 36 in there. Right? And there's your equation. So there's not going to be a whole lot of work to show for you. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Do you have questions?
So are we graphing every single one of them, like on the paper?
No, just the ones that it says to graph. And I want you to graph them on Desmos.
Oh, we're not actually graphing them?
Right.
No, I just got it for out.
But listen up. I need you to listen. It's this. On your paper, for 9 through 14, those are the ones that say graph that you're going to do on Desmos. But on your paper, I want the center and the radius for those. And then graph those on Desmos. The only ones you have to graph are 9 through 14. And you'll do those on Desmos. That's all I have to say. Do you have any questions? Are there any questions? Does anyone have a question?
Can I go to the bathroom?
Yeah.
Go to the bathroom over there. And go to the bathroom and be on there.
That's Colby.
Are you in there?
Colby
If I
Cousins.
look at answers, make sure you get
Oh,
medical like
perfect.
attention.
Do you think that's Avery?
There's something wrong with them.
Avery Johnson?
This has space.
She's the princess. Kobe's the prince.
Wow, no, you just called those two.
So that's
Someone wrote
Avery.
on a paper, Princess Charming, so now I don't know who that
I think that's Avery Johnson.
Wow.
Uh-huh.
Wow.
10 minutes.
Are they in the same class together?
Princess.